Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube and Rumble. You can find us on both channels. If you're watching us YouTube, please do me a favor and subscribe. Hit the bell and subscribe. And during the course of the show, it'd be nice if you liked the show and add a comment and send it to a friend. So when I first started doing this podcast about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we had a little over 6,000 subscribers. Now we've doubled that in a year, and we really need to accelerate to get it going to increase the amount of people that are watching our show. So there's a few things before we get started on the show I wanted to talk about, and one of them is the Los Angeles Mission. You can see it scrolling on the screen below here. It's the losangelesmission.org. They serve about 400,000 meals a year to the people on Skid Row. They provide some emergency shelter for the folks that need to get off the streets for the night. And they'll provide some basic services, where to get a shower, maybe get some clean underwear, and some other basic services, including some basic medical treatment if they're on the street, but they're not ready to get off the street. But also, they use those interactions to find people who are ready to make a change in their life. And they have a program where they do wraparound services from anywhere from 6 months to a year to deal with all of their needs to reintegrate in society, including job training, job searches, educational needs, and certainly any mental health, addiction, or physical medical needs. They do a great job. They've been doing it for over 80 years right down there on Skid Row. They are one of the bright spots in how Los Angeles handles the homeless. They do get some money from government, but not much, because they do have a faith-based element. So if you can help them out, I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, I'm going to have Troy Vaughn on my show tomorrow on Briefing with the Chief, which is on kgradb.com at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion with him, because he was also had been addicted and was homeless, former military guy. And his story is a story of hope and faith and recovery. And now he runs the Los Angeles Mission, does a great job. And so tune in to kgradb.com at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to hear the story of Troy Vaughn. And we will talk a little bit about homelessness in Los Angeles and the failure of the overall policies of California and Los Angeles, because that's my opinion. I won't push Troy to jump in there, because he's got to stay friends with all those guys. But I don't have to. I get to speak the truth. You can also catch me speaking the truth on my X handle at LASD Jordan. That is at LASD Jordan. Now, we have a great show here today. We're going to go over the movie Steve McQueen. And I'm not Steve McQueen, the Bullitt with Steve McQueen. I mean, Steve McQueen is such a big star. That's what you want to think of when you first think of Bullitt. But it is a really good platform for him to show just who Steve McQueen is, Mr. Cool. And I really enjoyed the movie, and I got a couple guys coming on. But before I do want to talk about my other show that's on every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I was talking to the guest beforehand. I have a really good lineup of people coming on Briefing with the Chief on kjrdb.com. It includes somebody who fought in Benghazi when the CIA annex was attacked. It includes the candidate running against George Gascon, the Soros-funded DA. It's Nathan Hochman is coming on my show. I also have somebody coming from the Manhattan Institute that wrote a book about the lies that the left tells about criminal justice reform. And the Manhattan Institute is a premier research organization out of New York that has been supportive of law enforcement. One of their fellows wrote the book, War on Cops. And so I have another fellow coming on. We're gonna talk to them about that stuff. So I have a lot of really good shows coming up, and so I would hope that you tune in. And I mean, I just got a commitment also from AJ Lauterbach. He's a former sheriff of a border county in Texas. And we will dive into, we got all these hand wringers in Chicago, and you're talking about how the immigrants are impacted them. I want to hear how it's impacting the small towns and cities along the border, because MSNBC and CNN don't cover that. And it's important that you understand, why is Governor Abbott doing what he is? Well, probably because he has to do something. Otherwise, the state is going to be completely destroyed by the policies of the Biden administration. So a lot of good shows coming up. But today we're going to have fun because we're going to go over a Hollywood classic. It is the movie Bullitt with Steve McQueen. Before I introduce the complete show, let me bring on the guys that are going to help me talk about this movie. And that is, first, we'll go by rank. We'll go retired lieutenant John Baylis. He's a California refugee. He's hiding out in Nevada. He's avoiding the state taxes in California. And you know what? He's got some interesting stuff going on in his life. And so, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, so John, you told me beforehand that you're in a competition, right? So you're in a competition. Can you explain the competition and what you want our viewers and listeners to do to help you to win that competition?
Well, basically, it's called Mr. Health and Fitness, and it's part of the Muscle and Fitness magazine, and they do a thing every year, and it's a grand prize, like 20 grand, to get on the cover, and they do a article on you and everything else. There were probably thousands upon thousands that applied. They knocked it down. They handpicked the top 50, and I'm one of the top 50. And in May 6th, they'll give us the info to where you can go online and vote. I don't want anybody to buy any votes, because they'll probably do the thing like everybody else does. If you subscribe, we'll give you 400 more votes. But, the more votes you get, the better chance you have of winning that. But at the same time, you have to have the bona fides that you work out or in shape and everything else. So I'm hoping. We'll see. If I win, I win. If I don't, I don't.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, but I do realize that 20,000 is really only 1 month of going out to restaurants for you to find restaurants. So
in Vegas, yeah.
so we got to help up John. He's got to be able to continue living that lifestyle, going to these great restaurants. When May comes, we'll look at health and fitness there. What's the name of the magazine again?
It's Muscle and Fitness, and I'll put out the info on Facebook.
Okay, Muscle and Fitness.
To you and everybody else.
Okay, and then I'll forward it to you guys. Now, John and my next guest, they worked with me as my operational staff in a room that is about the size of my dining room, right next to each other, and they became pretty good friends.
I couldn't stand that guy.
Couldn't stand the guy at first. Well, I got to tell the story. So, let's bring on a retired Sergeant Scott Orr, who also is another California refugee. He's in Tennessee, and he's telling me he's got 71 acres out there, which sounds like way too much work for me, but to me anyways. But Scott, welcome to the show.
Glad to be back. Enjoyed the last one. I don't know if I don't know if I'll enjoy this one too.
Well, you're at least you're thousands of miles away from each other, right? But there are two things these guys had in common when they worked for me, because they did work for me as my operations staff. One, they had a great affinity for good food.
Yeah.
Right? And this was a common thing. And they were both really, really hard workers. Really hard workers.
And we laughed our ass off when we
and you had a good time. Yes, you had a good time too. But these guys, they knew how to work. They knew how to get things done. They took the pressure off of me, because we were in kind of a pressure cooker when we were working over there. And when I finally left there, I felt like I had all this stress lifted off my shoulder. I was going through other stuff at the time, as you know, but when I got away from that thing, I was like, I didn't realize how much pressure I was under. And but I did enjoy working with you guys, and I appreciate you coming back and reconnecting so that we can go over this great movie, The Bullitt, right? With Bullitt with Steve McQueen. So, let me introduce the movie real quick here. This is the movie is Bullitt, It was released in 1968. It's a neo-noir action thriller film directed by Peter Yates and produced by Philip D'Antoni. And it stars Steve McQueen, Mr. Cool, and Robert Vaughn. And let's see here, Jacqueline Bisset, beautiful Jacqueline Bisset. John Gordon actually plays McQueen's partner in this film. And then a very interesting role for Robert Duvall, kind of just a cameo almost, right?
Yeah.
But he's
Yep.
a great award-winning actor, and he just kind of plays a bit part here. Simon Oakland, that's the big guy that plays his captain.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And of course, the guy from Three's Company.
Norman
Mr. Roper. Yeah, Mr. Roper's in Norman Fell.
Yeah,
He plays
Norman
Mr.
Fell.
kind of the tough, angry captain in this film. So a lot of interesting people, and there are even more people in this as we get through the movie that I recognized and I had to look up. But I enjoyed this years ago when I watched the movie, and I've been wanting to do this show all the time. You guys both watched the movie. John, what did you think of the movie overall?
Well, I mean, I saw it when it first came out, and I thought it was phenomenal. But you look at it nowadays, and it's like the production values, the colors, the sound, everything's so different. But it was a good movie, and I love Steve McQueen. It was very well done. Great stunt work, stunt driving. In fact, they said, Steve used to tell everybody that he did all the stunt driving.
No,
he did a lot of it, but a lot of the close-ups. And in fact, they used to say that he'd stick his face out the window to make sure they saw his face in the car when they were driving. But the guy that did most of the driving for him was Bud Eakins, who, been his stunt driver for years. But no, it was a great movie.
Well, Mr. Cool, he worked. My understanding is he ran 5 miles a day, and he worked out every day too. So he was into the whole fitness regimen.
Oh yeah,
like
he was
you,
a big
right?
Driver. He did another movie called Le Mans, and he actually drove in Le Mans. He had his own team and his own car. I mean,
he had a phony
money,
name,
so he could do it.
In the actual race, the 24 hours of Le Mans.
Name, yeah.
He was actually in the Le Mans race, the 24 hours of Le Mans. So he's no fake, but stunts. He just
I've seen him in so many movies that I liked him in. And I think probably my favorite is Sand Pebbles.
I was just going to say that.
Great movie.
I like that movie. There's another one he plays where they're fighting the Germans off, and they kind of got I can't remember the name of the movie.
Great Escape.
Yeah, that one. But yeah, that was a little more Hollywood. I mean, did they have a motorcycle where they're jumping over hills, and they would have just shot him, right? So he had to survive.
And he didn't do those jumps. He did a lot of that riding, but he didn't do the jumps.
I can't remember the name, but it was a movie where he was. They were understaffed and they were fighting off the Germans and holding off. It's something like the Battle of the Bulge. I think you remember the movie, and he played like the angry soldier who was, we always had somebody in our command who was always telling us what we ought to do, and he was that guy, right? And
we had a whole unit full of people that wanted to tell us how to do our job.
It's funny. I get so many compliments when I do run into people about how they enjoyed working in transit. And when we had it, it was really good. And I had one guy said, "Yeah, you were tough, but you were doing the right thing." And I didn't get that when I was running the place, but they saw how it fell apart after we left, right? So, and well, you certainly experienced that, Scott, because you were still there when it was.
Yeah, I pity you.
Like I said the last time, I was in a meeting and I'm sitting there going, I've been on for 31 years. I'm 55 years old. What am I doing getting berated for something? And then at the end of the meeting, you anything to say? Today's my last day.
That's my man.
Can't do that. Oh, yes, I can.
Yes, you can. Absolutely. That's, it's just goofy, whatever. I'm past that. It's just that it's really frustrating that the people who take the transit system today are dealing with a lot of crime, a lot of disorder, and it's primarily the fault of the board of supervisors. Even though we had a team in there that wasn't an A team, they were still better than what they replaced them with, and it just seems to be getting worse. But it's not just L.A. transit; it's New York transit. It's all over the country. They embrace this concept of, unarmed civilian ambassadors is the key, and we all know that's not going to work. So, but,
Yeah, it doesn't
but we
work.
kind of got this
Just
whole
ask
leftist.
Portland how their park ambassadors who've been
Work.
assaulted, stabbed, and killed they had to bring
And
back
I used to
the police.
interact with a Portland commander who was up there running their TriMet transit folks, and I because they wouldn't even call them a police department, they call them a police bureau or something like that. I
Yeah.
can't remember. And Portland Police Bureau, they just lowered them in terms of importance, and and he was a good guy, and he had good people working for him. But I can't imagine what it's like to work up there now. But hey, so in this movie, we have let's do the opening scene, Martine, and one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about is obviously the cars, the clothes, just how these guys dress. And it is 1968. When this movie was released, it was actually considered the best movie of 1968. It received a bunch of nominations, although I don't think it won any nominations for the Academy. And like you said, John, the production value today in comparison to then is different. But the fact that so this was considered the best, and actually was accepted in the Library of Congress as to preserve as a culturally important. And the thing about this is it's so everybody kind of hated the cops in 1968. It was like we've come full circle and we're back to that hate the cop kind of mode. But Steve McQueen was Mr. Cool. That people just kind of forget it. They said that the review said that people kind of forget this was cops because Steve McQueen was there, right? So, so what do you think, Scott? Opening scene, cars, clothes. So we got overcoats, different kind of look, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. It just, to me, it's like, when did we lose that? I mean, even all, the detective with their overcoats and everything, it's like, you knew these guys were, do their business, and they looked professional, and I don't know. I guess I was born a couple generations too soon. But it was
I worked for this old guy at West Hollywood. I'm trying to remember, Lieutenant. Oh God, I can't remember him now. And we all had to wear suits. Johnny B, who was the lieutenant back in Detective Bureau when you first started working there?
Oh God.
I mean, Finn was the sergeant, and it was I think he was
Name's
actually
on the
dating.
tip of my tongue.
He was dating a judge who was not very attractive at Beverly Hills Court at the time too. But we all had to wear suits, and all the other stations are running around in soft clothes and or in cargo pants or whatever. They weren't wearing suits, but we had to wear suits everywhere.
Yep.
But I remember going to Lenox. I was going down to Lenox. I had somebody I need to interview down there, and I come in this suit, and I was probably 28 or 29. And Lennox wasn't used to seeing somebody show up in a suit and say, "Hey, I need to talk to this prisoner." And I could tell that, like, who is this guy? Why is this guy here? I kind of just showed my badge, and they saw it was a sheriff badge. They didn't examine it, and it's like everybody got, we don't know who this guy is, so let's treat him like he's somebody important because I wore a suit. So,
Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing. But here's Robert Vaughn, and I forget what he played in. I'm trying to think of
Man from Uncle.
Man from Uncle. That's it. He was in Man from Uncle, and he played
in the Magnificent Seven, the original.
That's right, with Yul Brynner
and
Steve McQueen. Yeah, but he plays the politician here who's trying to bring a witness to testify. I don't know why they're doing the testimony in San Francisco, because he plays a federal politician. Normally that would be obviously in DC, but they wanted to place it in San Francisco to showcase the city, I think, because they did a lot of shooting around the city, and I think probably I don't know if that's true or not, but probably because Steve McQueen wanted that, and he was at the height of his career, one of the highest grossing actors at the time, and he could dictate what he wanted at the time. But one of the more, it's these clothes and then the cars you see. If you notice all the cars in these opening scenes, and certainly his Mustang, we see that a little bit later, and the Charger comes in a little bit later too, which is I really liked. I think if I had to pick a car, what car I liked out of the two, the Mustang or the Charger, I think I liked the Charger more. The lines on it is really beautiful, and of course, I do like Mustangs as well. Johnny B, any comment about the clothes? You're about looking good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't see that anymore. The overcoats. In fact, I had an overcoat when I was a detective sergeant in West Hollywood.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
But it's hard in Southern California to wear an overcoat. Maybe for a month or two.
Only during the winter, buddy.
Yeah. Other than that, you're just going to sweat all day if you're wearing an overcoat.
Yeah, and probably the last 2 years we've had a lot more rain than we've had in the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, you might be looking at maybe 2 or 3 days of rain a year, so the overcoat didn't work.
So I mean, up in San Francisco, my wife lived there until she was 14. So she watched the movie last night with me again, and she's like, "Oh, that's this street, that's this street, that's this street." And then when they're chasing, I said, "Oh, they're chasing through the Presidio," and she looks at me like, "You remember the Presidio?" And I'm like, "Every time we went up to San Francisco, you made me go to the Presidio." But yeah, I recognize it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, you got to explain what the Presidio is, Scott, so that our audience.
The Presidio was an Army base that was also like my wife's father was in the Navy for 31 years and spent most of his time in San Francisco. So they lived, the housing was on the Presidio. So it was an Army base, but it was also housing for the Navy, Marines, Army, and it was more of a supply depot and then there was the what's that Army hospital I think it's Madigan or whatever, that was there. And then, in the 90s, they decided that, oh, we're going to change Presidio and we're going to turn it over. So now it's a park.
Right.
And they still have the housing, and now it's, low income housing. And it's not run by the parks. I don't think it's run by the parks anymore, or the National Park System. I think now they've turned it over just to San Francisco and let them destroy it. So
exactly.
But yeah, she grew up there, and we used to go to all the Baker beaches right there, which is a famous beach. It's the one, see the pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. That's Baker Beach. So we'd go down there, and I said, "Well, did you ever swim down here?" And she goes, "No, because the rip tide is so bad that it would just suck people out into and drown them." So they would play on the beach all the time because they actually lived right across the street. But it was like, it's like in the middle of this city, you have this big open spaces, and now they're starting to build on it, of course, because
it's California.
Yeah, you got to have some place.
Well, I mean, it's they passed a law that was Scott Wiener, this guy up in San Francisco. Nonprofits can build on their land now, housing without all these permits. It's just a way to do things like that with those. I feel bad because they have this big piece of property down in West LA that was deeded, I think, to the Veterans Administration, where they have the cemetery and stuff. And the city and other people keep trying to get pieces of that to develop it because it's valuable real estate. And you saw that with was the Tustin Air Base.
Yeah, I was.
Well, give it to us. Give it to us. And the municipality always wants it. And it's like, hey, this is, everybody owns that. I mean, the guy in Iowa helped pay to support that. Why are we giving this property up to these local folks without anything in return, right? And when I went to the Naval Postgraduate School, I could imagine what the Presidio was like, because it was this big campus that I went to, and they had all this military housing, and they housed us when I was going. So I went a total of 4 weeks. 1 week a quarter, and they would just house us there, and it was great. And I could just imagine what it was like to live on the Presidio. Let's see, I lived in the Bay Area for 55 years. San Francisco used to be a great place to visit. Certainly in the 1970s. Now you couldn't pay me to set foot in the place. I have a feeling everybody on the show feels that way.
Well, my wife would wait to take the bus to her Catholic school, the regular city bus. And then she would, after school, ride the city bus downtown and hang around the downtown until her mom got off work. I mean, that was in the, early 70s. And it's like, now I tell her I'll never go back there. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was doing some commentary on, I do commentary still on TNT radio as well, and we were talking about fentanyl, and they were arrested. Fentanyl is out of control up in San Francisco, just like here, and it's even worse up there because they had even more, because Gascon was the DA, then he was replaced by Chesa Bodine, so they had almost 12 years of stupid policy up there where they just they implemented harm reduction strategies and moved away from enforcement strategies, and just like here, their overdoses spiked. And they were talking about how the Tenderloin district and those areas, it's just an open air drug market where people coming from across the border, it was Hondurans and Guatemalans that were selling all the fentanyl up there. And the argument, the do-gooders up there say, well, they're just arresting people of color for dealing. And, finally, the sergeant who's running the crew, who's Hispanic, and most of his crew is Hispanic, says, the only people selling drugs up here are Hispanics from across the border. That's who I have to arrest. And I was surprised they actually printed the comment, because normally the media wouldn't do that. But yeah, that's what's going on in San Francisco. It's crazy. It's surprising, though. The mayor is going back towards the center, although she's still a lefty, and she's supporting repealing or at least amending Prop 47.
Well, look at Oregon. The whole, hey, we're going to legalize all the drugs, and now they can't understand why the drug problem is, has quadrupled since, and now they're thinking of repealing that and going back to arresting people and making them either go to jail or go to
treatment
rehab.
They did repeal that, or they made it a misdemeanor now. And it's funny, though. I watch this podcast, because I watch a few podcasts, but this one guy has a great. He says, the best thing to do for a liberal is give them what they ask for. And then they change, right? They give them what they want, and then when they get it, then they eventually change. Well, let's go into Mr. Cool, the scene, Mr. Cool. And, let's talk a little bit about Steve McQueen. Now, he died at a fairly young age. I think he was 51 when he passed away of cancer. He was a fitness guy, but he was also a Marine, Scott. Did you know?
Yeah, and if you read his, that's why I said I think my dad thought he was Steve McQueen, even though he was dark hair and brown eyes. But
Chief, I don't have that that sequence.
You don't have that sequence, Mr. Cool? It's okay. I guess we're not. Do you have what's the next sequence do you have?
Jacqueline Bisset.
Oh wow!
That's a good place to start.
No. Well, we'll have to just talk about Steve McQueen. Okay. Well, that's a good scene, but let's talk about Steve here, and we'll hopefully get some glimpses of him in the future in the other scenes. And so yeah, he was a Marine, right, Scott? As you were saying.
Kind of like, I think that's why my dad was one of his biggest fans when we were growing up. I mean, I was like, I was 5 years old in 1968 watching Bullitt with my dad. But he same type of background, bounced around, got beat from relatives, got beat up by my grandfather all the time, left home at 14, bounced around, tried to go to high school for a couple years, got arrested. So him and his crime partner, when they were 17, were told either go to county jail for a year, because back then there was no juvenile justice. It was you go in with all the adults. So he was given the opportunity to join the Marine Corps or go to jail. So him and his crime partner.
Are we talking about your dad, or are we talking about Steve McQueen?
My dad, but Steve McQueen was the same thing. He bounced around. He was in a circus act. I mean, all kinds of, he was a merchant Marine at 14 years old, because he was in a bar and met a couple merchant Marines. So, I mean, it's the same type of background. So I think that's why my dad related to it. But then got in a lot of trouble in the Marine Corps at first, then decided that, you can't beat him, join him. So he became a model Marine and said that it changed his life, which my dad said all the time. If I hadn't gone in the Marine Corps, I probably would have been dead.
Yeah, he was recognized for saving the lives of some folks in a training exercise too, Steve McQueen. So he was, he's the real deal. He would risk his life to save others, although it wasn't in the context of war.
Right.
And that's, I didn't take the opportunity to serve. I know you did, Scott, and I appreciate all those folks who have served, and that was Plan B for me. So I'm glad Plan A worked out.
Well, it was
But
Plan B for me, and that's where I ended up.
well, the thing about this, and I know Johnny B and I have talked about this, a lot of these old shows, when you look at them, you have to realize that most of these guys served in the military. A lot of them served in World War II. A lot of them served in Korea. And I think when we get into the Vietnam era, we have less and less people who served as ground line troops because it became less popular. But
Right.
yeah, there were a lot of guys, probably, and certainly Steve McQueen who served in some of our previous movies that we watched, that I watched with John, that have served in the military. I mean, Stewart, what's his first name?
Jimmy Stewart.
Jimmy Stewart. He ended up, I think he rose to the rank of brigadier general, but he did tons of missions. I think he fulfilled his 29 missions or whatever in World War II.
Yeah, he did. He was in the Army Air Corps in World War II.
Clark Gable went in as
Air Force and became brigadier general.
Yeah, Clark Gable, I think he was a tail gunner, and I don't know if he did all 29 of his things, but he served during the war, and he was an older guy when the war.
Charles Bronson, Jack Palance,
John Bronson, who was the guy in Liberty Valance? Let's see, it's
Lee Marvin.
Lee Marvin.
Yeah,
he was a
Marvin.
Marine, and he got seriously injured, and so it's. And we look at our people now who play these tough guys. I know there's this guy who plays in Reacher or whatever, and
Jack Reacher.
he made some negative comments about law enforcement recently. So I'm not a fan anymore. But there's a lot of tough guys on shows now who've never had to really, never served, never will serve.
I've always said, Pat, that there's guys that look like a tough guy, and there's tough guys that you would. I've always said, when you go into a bar and you hear the guy bragging about how he can kick everybody's ass and stuff like that, you don't need to worry about him. He's a blowhard. It's the quiet guy in the corner that's minding his own business is the guy that's going to whoop your butt.
Yeah, it's got a little size and a little, actually, the quiet guy knows the downside of losing. So he's just being, because, hey, if I got to fight, I'm going to fight. But, he's going to the hospital with me, regardless of how it comes out, right? And
a lot of famous producers in Hollywood and directors, served in the military. Like John Ford was,
John Ford,
famous for his combat correspondence and filming, battles and stuff like that, who went on to be so now you don't see that anymore. It's somebody who graduated college and went to some special, university that now they're the greatest director of all time. And it's like, these guys had an experience that they never forget. And then they, move on and do good things.
Fortunately, we do have some directors who never served, but, I think honor the military correctly. I think Steven Spielberg, when he does a war film, he displays the military in a positive light.
Peter Berg does a lot of that.
Oliver Stone, no, and so there's. No.
Oliver Stone, no.
There is a show. It's Military Mondays that Gerry does, who runs the channel. He does some military shows. Maybe we'll have to line you up again. Jump in on his show one of these times, since you were well, you can't talk about it now. Can you talk about it now? Is it?
I was a door gunner on a helicopter. I didn't have to do anything special.
Yeah,
kill
right.
people.
That's why everybody's like, "Why did you become a cop?" And I'm like, "Because I had no skills. I mean, I had skills, but not the skills that you can use, working in a plant somewhere or something."
Yeah.
So
you couldn't fix the helicopter, but you could shoot from it.
That's right. Wrote a few down.
So Steve McQueen was Mr. Cool here. He also took classes, I think, from Bruce Lee on karate. So he's big into the martial arts. He's big in fitness. He ran. He's a former Marine. He
Bruce Lee.
He kind of played the same character in most of his movies. He was the strong, silent. I mean, if you think of him from the movie Sand Pebbles, is the one that I think of the most. He just plays that stoic, tough guy, kind of a little bit like Clint Eastwood. What's it? The anti-hero hero kind of guy, and that people can identify with. And also, he exuded, positive. Even, it's kind of interesting because if you look at his background, there's probably a lot of trauma in his background. Yet on screen, he looked like he had it all together, right?
Right.
So, but enough on Steve. Let's get to the lady in the film, and let's show the episode with Jacqueline Bisset. John, I'll probably have to let you be the expert on Jacqueline Bisset here.
Not even close.
No. Well, they both,
One of the first
like I said,
things she
both these.
did.
All right. Well, wait a minute. Before we move, so we got Jacqueline Bisset here. We're going to see her pretty soon. This is Steve McQueen, our Lieutenant Bullitt's love interest in the movie. And there she is, wearing a pretty yellow shirt, and pretty good banter. And I don't know how old was she at the time. I didn't even look to see how old she was at the time. And
23.
Did you say this? 23. This was her first big film, John.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
she was a model.
Okay. So she crossed over from being model into acting.
Yep.
I
She's
think the
still
director
acting
liked.
now.
I think the director liked her too because he put her in the movie The Deep.
Oh, and that was
a good with Nick Nolte.
Deep.
Yeah,
Wasn't that like 1980-ish?
something like that.
The Deep, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
Yeah.
So okay, so this was interesting. So all right, so there in what we haven't talked about here is the plot of the show. Okay, so this lieutenant here has got a small crew of guys, and he's been charged with his department and this politician, which Vaughn plays, to protect a witness who's supposed to testify in the next couple of days at a congressional hearing. So it's really just a protection job. He's not really happy about it. The setup there, he's in the wrong hotel. The guy's name is supposed to be, his name is Ross. We find out later that it's just a double that gets killed here. So he leaves one guy in the room, and he goes to lunch. Now, what do you notice here? This is something that you had to do. If you were in a restaurant and they needed to contact you, he calls them up and says, "This is where I'm at. Here's the number I'm at."
Yeah.
Remember that before handheld. So this is what he had to do so that they can keep in charge. Keep track of the boss in case something happens. Right.
It was a different time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we first out in patrol, if something happened at home, the wife or girlfriend or whatever had to call the station to get you tell you to go make a phone call.
Yep. And and the thing about when we first started, I know when I myself and Johnny B first started, we didn't have handhelds. I don't know if that was the case for you, Scott.
No, when I first got to patrol, we didn't have we got handhelds like a month later, and then shortly after that, we got the MDT, but you could only run vehicles on it. Nothing else worked.
Yeah, but we had one radio, one handheld for the car.
That's it.
With two guys.
With 4 channels.
They looked like a giant walkie-talkie almost. Big
and then
battery, this big.
Writing your car calls on top of the car in pencil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't go into a restaurant unless you called, so there was no sit down eating, which is probably really a struggle for you, John, and because you couldn't go into the good ones and sit down and get served and talk to the waitresses. So you had to, unless you sat down and, hey, this is where I'm at right now. But that didn't work.
I never did that.
Subject to call. You're subject to a call.
Much later, till I was a lieutenant.
Yeah, we didn't have the luxury of LAPD.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to be out of service for 35, 40 minutes while I eat. We were like, you ate on the back of your radio. You ate on the trunk.
And you know what? Used to piss my partners off in West Hollywood, even when I was a trainee. We'd go to McDonald's because that was the only thing open at 2 a.m. And I'd wolf down 3 Big Macs and a soda, and they're still eating, and we get a hot call, and I'm in the car, turning it on, getting ready to go, and they're throwing food out the window because they never could eat. I ate so fast, and they're like, "How do you do that?" Easy.
My wife is listening to my show up there, and she says, "How come you eat so fast?" And it's it's those several years where you work the streets, because I worked pretty long stretch as a deputy, and then a fairly long stretch as a sergeant. You just had to eat, and even though you had your handheld radio. What most people, I'll clarify for our audience here, in the sheriff's department, you basically did an 8-hour shift, and you squeezed in any break or lunch in that 8-hour shift, yet you were still subject to call.
Yep.
The best you could do is have your buddy cover for you while you can finish your meal, but generally you just packed up your meal and you you took it with you till you finished a call and then you finished up. LAPD has a different thing. They have, what it is when they go to lunch, what do they call it? They had a
Code 7, I think.
Code
right?
7.
Code
Yeah.
7.
And they'd call in and say, hey, this is our time. And they know
So
where
they
they were at.
worked
But
like
they,
an
they were not
eight and a
subject
half
to call.
hour day. And then they would go code 7, then they would sit down and have a bite to eat, and they were off the clock. We never did that. You were always on the clock, and there were days when it was so busy, yeah, you really didn't get a bite to eat. Now for me, I worked a one-man car. I just packed a lunch. So it just made it easier because I always had food, and no matter what happened, if I couldn't stop to have lunch with by myself or with some folks, I had something to eat, and it made it a lot easier. Plus, I didn't always hit the McDonald's that gave you 50% off or whatever. I tried
Sure.
to eat healthy food as best I could,
Yeah, I
all those
tried
other
to
guys.
bring my lunch too occasionally, but it didn't work out that way. But I usually ate before shift, and that would
Yeah.
sustain me for a good 4 hours. And then if there was a break, I'd go to the tail of the pup,
Ah, yeah.
wolf down a
Yeah.
couple hot dogs, and then next call.
So on this scene with Jacqueline Bisset, though, the other thing I noticed was the music. Do you remember the music? They had the bass going, and there was no singing, but it was kind of that
Jazz.
beatnik kind of 60s kind of sound, jazzy kind of sound, which was, yeah, it was, and that Steve McQueen kind of, that's it. That was him, right? That
Right.
was him at the time.
Right.
It fit with the time. I wrote beatnik kind of music was what I kind of wrote,
Yeah.
so, and it wasn't folk, it wasn't rock, but it was, so so McQueen is in his restaurant or whatever, and with his girlfriend, and there is an assassination attempt that happens. Let's go to that scene, Martine. And some guys come to the apartment or the hotel desk, and they ask to come up, and they give the name of the politician. But this guy here, this guy that is playing Ross, is not really Ross. During the scene, you see a few things. The guy is, hey, don't let him in, stay away from the door, and he's not letting the guys come up, and he calls Steve McQueen. Now there's a kind of a breakdown in this movie. McQueen says, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and then everybody's killed, and by the time he gets there, the ambulance is there, multiple cars are there, and I'm thinking, okay, he should have said I'd be there in 15 minutes, and then that was believable. But these guys break in, and this is where we see the great stunt driver. They give him Bill Hickman, who plays the stunt driver, who drives it, and then his partner in this one is Paul Gange. He plays the hitman in this thing, and
he always played a bad guy.
He always played a guy. But this guy takes the chain off the door, and the policeman sees it, and the policeman does survive long enough. He survives, and he tells them, hey, the guy took the chain off the door, which we both know that chain wouldn't have stopped somebody kicking it down anyway.
Nobody.
So
the first thing I thought of, that lock and that chain, I'm like, who are they kidding?
Yeah,
my first thing was, why didn't you move him?
Yeah.
If they put me in charge of that detail to watch him, I would have moved him to a different hotel. That would have been the first thing I did.
Yeah. And not tell anybody.
Just
keep that room rented and just take him downstairs and take him to the local Marriott or whatever, and something that's a little safer. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
And then, like, as soon as he took the lock off and the cop realizes and is like, you can see he's like befuddled of why he did it, my gun would have been out. Because he didn't unlock it for no reason. There's something up, something's coming. So those are my takes on it. And then why didn't they kill the cop? So now you just left a witness. You're these two badass hitmen.
Yeah.
You leave a witness alive.
Right. Yeah. You already shot him. I mean, you're going down for a long time anyways, once they catch you. Yeah. I agree
shot
with
him
you.
in the leg, but I was surprised that they didn't coup de grace him at the end.
Right. I thought they were going to shoot him in the head with the shotgun, but they walked out.
Yep.
Well, I think he had the right weapon of choice too. If you're going to do something like this, you want a shotgun. That would be my choice to use that. If I had the time to get the shotgun out, that's what I pulled out.
Yeah.
That was a decent shot, but a shotgun makes it a lot easier. But yeah, so those obviously those things are problematic in the movie, that he does these things, right? That the director doesn't really show that out. And I wrote down here, it just doesn't time right, meaning
Yeah.
he says I'll be there in 5 minutes, and when he gets to the screen of the shooting, you got 40 people already there. The crime scene
Yeah.
people are already there. So I think that they kind of messed up on that one a little bit. So maybe they were going to.
They're already wheeling out the victims, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, there's your
That'd
watch
be a couple
broken.
hours later. Yeah.
Yeah. But I looked at, when watching it, when they're wheeling out his one cop that got shot in the leg, and the guy's like, "Oh, he's got a bleeder," and it's like, "Oh, no tourniquet, no nothing."
I know.
You're just letting him bleed out. I mean,
hold on, let's hurry. And they got him on I guess the cloth stretcher was probably at the time to get him through elevators and stuff like that. But yeah, but you're right.
No
They don't
bandage,
have no direct
tourniquet,
pressure, no
nothing.
tourniquet, no nothing.
And then the media's all standing right over him taking pictures.
I know, that was the other thing. How do they get there? So anyway, so there's
exactly.
And who lets him get that close? I mean, he's right there taking pictures of the Ross, or you think it's Ross, but he's like standing over him taking pictures, and then going, "Oh my God, that's bad." It's like,
yeah, that wouldn't be a crime scene. We'd had the tape up; they'd have been pushed far away, and I think they had those strategies back then. But the director is trying to squeeze as much excitement in there as possible. And I guess we got to clarify. So this guy Ross, the guy that was killed, is playing somebody who skimmed from the Chicago mob, $2 million.
$2 million.
And they're looking for him, and that's who the assassins want. When we find out that he's not actually Ross, he was paid to pretend like he was, so the other guy can get away. But clearly the information was leaked, and this guy knew what was going on. But they ended up killing him anyways, right? The pretend Ross, I guess we should say. I think his character name is Rennick. And so they end up killing him as well. And that's supposed to, my assumption is that closes the door on who Ross is. Now, I think back in this, 50s, 60s, we didn't have fingerprints and identity stuff as well as we do now, right? So it'd be harder to do that now, to impersonate somebody and the person die, and then you're free and clear, right? The real Ross, the real bad guy. It's hard to do that. Everybody's got a camera, pictures are being taken. It's just not a likely scenario. But so in this assassination thing, we pointed out, the chain and the lock wouldn't have stopped anybody anyways. So taking it off was kind of foolish. The time frame, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and within 5 minutes, you got the media there, you got the ambulances there, you got the crime scene techs there. Well, we need to clarify, when you go to a dead body call and the crime scene is coming and homicide's coming, how long are we talking about?
Oh God.
On Friday to Saturday night.
Day, probably a couple hours at least.
And the coroner, we're talking 5-6 hours.
Oh yeah, easy.
Maybe the homicide guys might roll up first, depending on who's on call and where they live at.
Well, I think when I was working gangs in Compton, they would purposely wait like an hour or two to get there, because by that time we've already tracked down who the suspect is for them. We just turn it. Yeah, we think it's this guy because one of the witnesses said he had this tattoo or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame them, because let them get some lead, let the ground pounders, and because you were working gangs though, so you knew a lot of them were gangster murders, right? So
yeah,
because you knew who all the players were. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, and we had probably one of the best homicides in the country. We still do it. We still do, I imagine. But so we looked at all that stuff, and let's so now we get the political pressure on the case, which I have to suggest, I don't think I used to get political pressure on cases on transit, but I wouldn't say that was a lot of that. But so let's go to the senator, Robert Vaughn. He implies, hey, you do a good job on this, and I'll take you to the top, whatever that means. And San Francisco was a little different town, Scott. I don't know if I had to pick a city that was a little more corrupt or maintain that corrupt vibe, I would say San Francisco did longer, more so than LA. I don't know if you believe that to be true or not. That's, I think you used to buy spots in the Tenderloin. This is just a story I heard from some old San Francisco coppers that stuff continued into the 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There in San Francisco. So, but this senator, he comes to the hospital, sees what's happened as witness. Of course, he's blaming the lieutenant, but there's also somebody in this scene, George Stanford Brown,
The
the
rookies.
doctor. The
Link,
rookies. I couldn't figure. God, I know I've seen his face before. I had
Mod
to look.
Squad.
Was he in Mob Squad?
No. That's Lauren
That's-
Nielsen Jacobs.
Oh,
But-
okay.
But he was
Yeah, he
definitely.
was in
I had
The
to find the
Rookies.
TV show he was in. He was in The Rookies, and I remembered. I go, God, I know that guy. I've seen him before.
And he also played in Roots, the original Roots.
Yes,
Yes.
he played
Yes.
Chicken George, I think.
No, that's been the guy that got ran over. The dancer was Chicken George.
Was he?
Ben, I can't think of his last name. But no, he played one of the slaves in it. But yeah, he was a good actor. He was married to Tyne Daly from Cagney and Lacey.
Oh, was
Really?
he?
Yeah, back in '66, they got married. They were married for about 10 years. Yeah.
Well,
Wow. I didn't know that.
well, we
Hey.
see Robert Vaughn go into. Go ahead, John.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So we see Robert Vaughn go in there, and obviously he tells Steve McQueen, what a failure he is, and
Of course, he's a
I need to
politician.
talk to. I have to talk to my witness. I every now and then we had a high-profile case on. The only time I really felt any pressure from politicians when we had a high-profile case on transit, and there was this expectation. Well, what do? You got to solve it right away, or how come you didn't stop it? That was the other one I always liked. How come you couldn't stop this? They did have just this unrealistic expectation in transit because they were contracting for you that every bad thing you guys would deal with, and then if something did bad, you would hide it. It happened that was bad, you would hide it. And I remember I got to the point where, hey, listen, bad stuff's going to happen because we go through some bad areas. Our goal is to keep it at a minimum,
Right.
and then we make sure everybody's aware of it so that we can stop it in the future. Hiding it and ignoring it and pretending it doesn't exist is not a good strategy.
Nope.
That's like hope is not considered a good
No,
strategy.
hope and crossing your fingers like
Yeah.
Governor Newsom is not a good strategy, right?
No.
But he blames obviously Steve McQueen, Bullitt here, Lieutenant Bullitt, for this failure. But you also see eventually in this scene where the senator's kind of being a jerk is his captain, Simon Oakland. He's the kind of the
Simon
big
Oakland.
guy.
Yeah,
He
he's a
played.
good character.
Do you remember Darren McGavin playing in The Night Watchman or
Stalker?
Night
Yes.
Watch?
Night Stalker.
With-
Yeah.
He was the editor of the newspaper that Gavin worked for. Darren McGavin
really?
worked for. He was a great character actor.
Yeah,
Loved
he
him.
was. He was in a lot of war movies.
Oh yeah.
He played a pretty gruff guy, and and it's interesting. He's one of those guys that he says, "Hey, I gave Lieutenant Bullitt the responsibility. It's his case. He'll handle it the way he wants to handle it because obviously the senator wants to control how this is happening, which is another thing. Every now and then you get a politician that wants to control how you're going to do stuff, and I did get a little of this at West Hollywood, when I was the DB lieutenant,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it was Odenthal and some of the other, they all thought they knew how to be investigators. And, Odenthal had been on the sheriff's department in the past, but just micromanaging what you did was problematic, which is what this guy wants to do. And I like Oakland as the captain. He says, no, it's his gig. And he's got it. But an interesting thing I found about Oakland is in his early performing years, he played the violin.
Oh, really?
Could you imagine this big, huge guy playing the violin? I thought that's pretty interesting. And then the other thing you see, and this is the sign of the times, is George Stanford Brown is the doctor.
Yes.
And the politician says, I want another doctor.
Oh,
He doesn't say why, but it's clearly implied why.
right. And
Oh, yeah.
he knows why he's overhearing the conversation, so he knows exactly why he wants another doctor.
Exactly. So so they do try to frame some of the stuff that's going on in the 60s with the racial animus that's going on, and the powerful white politician doesn't trust, or doesn't want, even if he trusted him, doesn't want the black doctor working on his patient. He sees him as less than. And he's probably, at the time, and this is way before affirmative action, for him to rise up to be a doctor as a black guy at the time, he's probably top notch. He's probably, you know what I mean? There was no helping along the way. He had to perform and most likely compete with everybody else without a boost up. So he probably was one of the best ones in the city in an emergency room.
Right.
But, we had these racial attitudes going on. And, but I do remember him in Rookies. I liked him in Rookies. That show, I think, ran for 4 years. I remember watching it as a kid. And so he was a good actor. But, then I think we have time for one more scene. And this is, they try to attack him in the hospital, right? They try to finish him off in the hospital. And what is interesting is now the bad guy, he obviously can't take a shotgun in his trench coat, but he uses an ice pick.
Yeah.
He uses an ice pick, which, there was, I don't know, Johnny, if you remember Louis Buchalter and Murder Incorporated, there were some of those guys who used ice picks. They would put them in the air, and that's how they would assassinate guys. And so there is a historical reference that the mafia, some of the hitmen would use ice picks to kill their victims.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like the fact that the one doctor sends him to the wrong place.
Yeah.
And then calls Steve McQueen and says, "Hey, this guy was asking about your victim, and I sent him to the second floor, not the floor you're on."
Yeah, he was pretty astute, that guy.
I don't think you would get that anymore. I think they go, oh yeah, he's up on. Well, I don't know, with HIPAA laws and everything else.
I don't even think they'll get into the area, right? Are you a relative, right? That's what you'd get, and can we see your ID?
Where's your badge?
Where's your badge?
Nowadays, they
got to stop
into
at
the laundry room and get a doctor's coat and stethoscope.
Yeah,
and walk around like a doctor before they hit somebody.
Well, now, but you go into the hospital, you got to go to the front desk. They scan your ID, and then they print you out a visitor's badge with your picture on it. So back then, of course, the one scene, with the doctor there, Steve McQueen, they're in the ICU, and he's smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best place to be smoking a cigarette around oxygen and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's and then this is the first chase scene. He actually finds the guy and he's chasing him. The guy ends up getting away in this scene, but just adds a little drama though. But I just thought it was interesting that he goes with an ice pick to do the murder. Let's see.
Yeah.
And then
Steve McQueen chases him with no gun out.
Yeah, that's
chasing an assassin with no gun. Your gun's in your holster.
Yeah, and his jacket was. I almost got. Is he wearing a sweater? I mean, what he was is just kind of a waist-length, a little more than a waist-length jacket. But he's chasing him through this alleyway or wherever it is.
And then when they show him, he doesn't have a bead of sweat on him.
Yeah, see, he's got a sweater on. I'm going, what the hell? So it was definitely different time because I don't think I'd ever been caught wearing a sweater if I was on duty, not like that anyways. So yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anybody wearing a sweater at work like that. So anyway, so it was using the ice pick. And during this time, of course, the captain actually, not the captain, the Rennick, the fake Ross actually dies. And McQueen is angry. His officer shot, his partner shot, and the guy that he was supposed to guard dies. And he wants to catch these guys, so he pretends like the guy's still alive, and he moves into another place, and he doesn't tell anybody. And the great thing about it is Captain, he authorizes him to do this the way he needs to do it. But this is where the other captain, our politician, goes to find a more friendlier captain to kind of pressure him. And probably somebody that works headquarters. And this is where Norman Fell, Mr. Roper, comes in. For me, I have a hard time taking the guy serious, even in this movie, because, I wasn't a huge fan of Three's Company, but I did watch it occasionally, and he played just this goofball neighbor who
landlord. that
Yeah,
they're
the
trying to hide
landlord.
from.
Yep.
Well, I
He
told
had
my
a good role in that. He could do comedy and everything.
yeah, and I told the wife, I said, "Do you think when he was making this serious cop movie in 1968 that he would end up as Mr. Roper?"
Yeah.
Well, I think back in the day, people would pick and choose if they were busy, they would pick and choose their scripts because they want. I'm sure Steve McQueen says, "Okay, I'm only going to do a certain film because I got to maintain the Mr. Cool thing."
Right.
And Feld and everybody else who are character actors like to get that bigger break, so they're avoiding stuff that would hold them back. But when he was Mr. Roper, that's probably 30 years later.
Yeah.
Says, okay, I'm 60 something. I ain't got that many roles left in me. Let me take, and I'm not going to be the leading man and to here to eternity. So let me take what comes along, right?
Yeah, making 15,000 an episode. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I could live with that. I could be the
Yes.
buffoon. I'll play I am,
And-
so I can play it quite well.
For reruns.
What was that? And the rerun
Royalties
money, yes.
for reruns.
Yeah, and the rerun. But then he died, and they replaced him with Don Knotts.
Don Knotts,
Knotts, yeah.
Yep, I remember that. Yep.
You know,
So Mr.
for
Roper
years
from
back
Three's
then,
Company with John Ritter, right?
Yeah.
And
Suzanne
Summer,
Joyce DeWitt.
Joyce DeWitt. That's
Yeah.
right. That's who
But
he was.
back then they used some of these hottie toddy like Steve McQueen and all them. They would never do commercials. Oh my God, commercials!
Yeah.
Nowadays you got.
Well,
people
they probably
doing
make more
commercials.
commercials than they do.
Yep. Oh, and they make a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it goes national.
Less time, good steady income. And we are at the halfway mark break. I think we're ready for a commercial break. If anybody's got to take a potty break, John, this is the time.
Yep.
Okay, Martine, if we're ready, we've got the.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We are here reviewing the movie Bullitt with Steve McQueen. I got retired Lieutenant John Baylis with me and retired Sergeant Scott Orr with me. And I just want to remind you guys, if you look at the comments, they have a link for all the audio versions of my show, Briefing with the Chief. So you can hit that link and listen to, I think I got like 17 shows. So you can binge with the Chief on www.speaker.com. That's a broad podcast platform. You just get the audio versions of the show. And and I don't get a lot of action on my Rumble portion of that show, but I'm doing pretty good on the KGRA digital broadcasting part of that show. And so go ahead and check us out on kgradb.com. And also keep in mind, if you're watching this show on YouTube, to remember to subscribe, like the show. And if you're watching us on Rumble, on that platform, you follow us on Rumble, but you still like and comment on both platforms. And of course, share it with a friend and tell a friend. Our subscriptions are going up, and the more subscriptions and like you have, it helps the algorithms, and they push the show out so other people can see. And of course, everybody wants to see us, right? We're just these hidden gems. So welcome back, guys. You guys got all your business done, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the next scene is it's interesting because we're going to see a great actor in this next scene, and that is let's do it. Sunshine Cab. It's Robert Duvall, and
Meet the cabbie.
I saw that he was in this movie, and I was wondering. I couldn't remember. God, where was he at? And then I watched the movie, of course, and he's the cab driver, and he doesn't say that much. He just talks about he allegedly had picked up Rennick early in the movie, and the fake Mr. Ross early in the movie, and he drove him to do certain things, and Steve McQueen had him take him on the exact same route. He figured out who he was, had him take on the exact same route, so they can figure out what's going on. My assumption is he made calls at a certain time, so the police were able to track when those calls happened and who they went to, and he was being able to start putting the pieces together based upon. Of course, this all happens in the context of a movie within a few hours. I think if you had to get information from the telephone companies at the time, it at least took a few days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so, and in this case, it just, oh yeah, this is who he called, this is where. So obviously we got Danny Regalado, and he says hello to Scott Orr.
Hey, Danny.
In the comments. So Danny is a regular viewer of the show. Danny, hey, thanks for joining us again. I'm going to have you back on. I've been looking for a good Joseph Wambaugh movie for you to come on and talk about. Just let me know in the comments. Have you read the book? God, what's the movie about? The Bleeding. It's the one. It's the one about the DNA. It's a true story. So let me know if you've read that book or saw that movie, Danny, and maybe we can do something on that. But anyways, thanks for joining us again. So, but Robert Duvall is in this film. He was in, obviously, Godfather. He was in. There's so many. John, you're the aficionado for Hollywood. Let's talk about Robert Duvall. What do you got to say?
Oh God, this is one of his first things. He's been in everything. True Grit. He played a bad guy in True Grit. The Godfather. He was the consigliere, which is another falsity because he's Irish. But no, he's a hell of an actor. And if you've never seen Secondhand Lions, watch that movie.
Secondhand Lions. What is the theme of that one?
Caine. Wonderful movie.
Great movie.
Is it a cop thing?
No.
It's about life and war and raising kids. Just a beautiful movie. Very well done. The acting is superb.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Well, he played it. Well, he played in Apocalypse Now, right?
Yeah.
I just love the smell of napalm in the morning, right? And
yep. Oh God, that was the best.
Charlie don't surf.
Charlie don't surf. He wanted to go surfing, and he's got the big old cavalry hat on, and he's in the air cav, and he's and it's obviously, I don't know if any of this is, if they actually did this stuff, but they played the classical music as they're flying into the village to blow it up.
Flight of the Valkyries.
Yeah.
What is it? Not the name.
Flight of the Valkyries. Yeah.
So he's a great character actor, and well, here's our other guy. Here's Simon Oakland, right?
Oakland.
Yeah.
That's the guy we're talking about. Robert Vaughn's in this scene as well.
The They're just so nice to Robert Vaughn. I mean, even finally at the end when he talks to Chalmers, he kind of puts him on notice. But if dude showed up to me when I'm going inside church, he basically is threatening me. It wouldn't have ended well.
Exactly.
Well, and this guy, I mean, he plays it pretty good. Simon Oakland. He says, "Yeah, okay, right. Well, Dad, I got to go to church." You know, he still supports Steve McQueen's character in there, Lieutenant Bullitt.
Well, that's what a leader should do.
Yeah,
and
right.
he said, "Here's my habeas corpus. Okay, I got it. We'll take care of it, right?" And you know, and he's not intimidated by this guy at all. And we all know it wouldn't be the senator. It would be some flunky that was come to talk to you. It wouldn't be the
Exactly.
because this guy would want plausible deniability, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. He wouldn't have done it himself. He would have he's got to have plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't know he was going to do that.
Exactly.
I'm a good guy.
Exactly.
He's a grandstander trying to get votes. You know, he's the type of guy that wanted to run as the law and order president. You know, because he's a senator now, and he wants to do this big mob arrest. Yeah, he's bucking for higher office. And I'll tell you, Robert Vaughn, really a nice man. Very short, 5'6", 5'7" at the max. When I worked West Hollywood, he came in one day at the counter, and he was much older, of course. You know, you're talking in mid-90s, because he played Man from U.N.C.L.E. in 1960 with David McCallum. And he came in, and he had all these brochures that people are hanging out to tourists about where all the stars live. And you go on the bus and you see and he was upset because half of them were wrong. You know, people had moved years ago. They never lived there. And the bus
not on the list.
Up his street. And I'm like, okay, sir, you know, nice guy. But just a little guy and an old guy. You know, he hadn't been working for probably years when I saw him.
My name's not on the list, and they got all the wrong address.
Yeah. Well, he talked about, you know, Jimmy Stewart. He doesn't live there anymore, and this is wrong. This is fraud. And I'm like, okay.
Fraud. That's a big one.
I was the watch commander, so I had to talk with him. But he was a nice guy. He was a nice old man.
So we did have a review of Secondhand Lions, and for Pop Culture Minefield, it's on there. I encourage you guys to watch it. And also Daniel Regalado piped in with a Great Santini.
Oh, that's a
great movie.
Good movie. Yes, I mean
he was a Marine.
He was a colonel in the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
treated his kids like shit, like they were troops.
Yeah, exactly. And another one, he played a dirtbag kind of. It was Joe Kidd with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Joe Kidd.
He
had a small part in there, but he was a killer. You know,
his hairline hadn't changed from 1968.
Exactly.
Well, there is hope for us bald guys. Then I should go. Start doing some acting jobs here. But he was also in Colors, wasn't he? I haven't done Colors yet, and I've been thinking, maybe Scott would be a good one for Colors.
They filmed it in Carson.
They filmed it at Carson, and you worked gangs, so yeah, he played the veteran. He played the veteran guy with Sean Penn, who was, he was an idiot in the movie. He's an idiot in real life. So obviously he didn't have to change his character very much. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that guy.
Neither am I. He was pro-police and all that. He used to go to LAPD, all their golf tournaments.
Did he? Duvall did.
Yep. He went to all their golf tournaments and he pushing all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, the police are bad.
Well, that's because he married, what was her name?
Yeah, the ugly one now.
He used to be a big, huge gun collector, Sean Penn.
Yep.
And then she made him melt him down and turn him into a statue.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm looking for subjects to do. There's this case of this black software engineer in New York that I was reading about. It just was in the news yesterday. I forget Madonna. She married Madonna. But he got into gunsmithing, and he built some of his own guns, and New York went and arrested him and convicted him. He never sold them, didn't use any of them, and it did it all in his house. And they're going to try and put him in prison for 18 years. mean,
Yeah.
he had the gun in his house. The gun's in his house, and so it's what is going on both in New York and California ever since I think it was the Dobbs decision where they said no, people have a right. You can't restrict their right to the Second Amendment. And now we're getting off on this thing, but I'm not a huge gun guy. I mean, if I wasn't a cop, I probably wouldn't even own a gun. But I understand the Second Amendment. And it just seems like California and New York are doing everything to restrict the gun rights in those states to fight the Supreme Court, clearly knowing what they're doing is a violation of the Constitution. And regardless of where you're at on the issue on the Second Amendment, what it does is it criminalizes people who are trying to follow law. Because even for retired cops, you have to figure out what the hell can I do now? I have no idea what I can do in California because the laws change every 6 months.
Yep.
And I think
They
both
do it on
Newsom,
purpose.
Newsom, the legislature in California, and Hochul in New York, and the legislature there are really violating their obligation to the citizens to give them common sense laws and rules to follow. And good people are getting caught up in these foolish laws because they want to fight the Supreme Court. They want that to be their next abortion rights issue, in which they're going to try and mobilize the left to get rid of all guns. I mean, that's what I see is going on in both
You're
states.
absolutely right. They
And
do it on
it
purpose.
is,
If the media did what they're supposed to do, it wouldn't happen. But they don't. The media placates them and allows
I read an op-ed about gun control in New York and California, and even some other states are trying to do the same thing. Is make these laws that either skirt the decision by the Supreme Court or the blatantly doing it to, like you said, fight the Supreme Court. Well, the op-ed is like, who do you see in the media or the politicians throughout there? Oh, we arrested this guy. It's some guy that's never had a criminal record. He's never done anything in his life. He buys a gun off another guy, but you didn't do the proper procedures, so now you got to go to jail, and they file a felony on you, and then we convicted of this gun violation. But yet these guys have stolen guns, shoot somebody, and they release them with no bail.
Well, I know this guy, a black guy, software engineer, 30 years in the industry, no criminal record. And now he has a criminal record because these guys are grandstanding on the whole gun rights thing. And to me, it's outrageous. It is really doing a disservice for all the honest. And you're right, Scott. Here's the deal: we could live in California, and particularly in Los Angeles County. You go out and you commit a crime or robbery with a gun, they won't even file the gun enhancement on you. So the guy who has the gun, who does the crime, they won't punish you in any extra way because it's not helpful to him. Well, if you really want to do, so basically they've criminalized people who try to follow the laws, and they ignore the criminals who use the guns.
That was the gist of the article, is that these so-called common sense, and to me, anytime a politician says common sense, there's none involved.
Exactly.
They these laws that they're passing, well, who's going to jail behind these laws? It's not the criminal, it's the the guy who was a law-abiding citizen.
Yes.
Now you change the law, and now he's the bad guy, and he's going to jail, and that's okay. But we're going to release everybody else because, they're at a disadvantage. They didn't have the luxury of growing up with privilege or whatever. And it's like, these laws only affect the people that don't need to be controlled.
Except the guy in New York is a black guy. They can make that same argument that he grew up without privilege, and they're going after him too. So it's really about
because he likes guns.
Yeah, and it's funny because he says I wasn't into gun, but
black.
He has, I guess, his basement. He must be doing well because he's got a basement in New York as well, or he does woodworking. He does all kinds of different hobbies where he's building stuff. He likes doing that, and he got into smithing during COVID, right? Which is, all of these are wholesome hobbies.
Right.
You're at home, doing stuff in your garage. You're not out, hitting up the prostitutes. You're not out shooting drugs. You're not doing any of that. You're in your basement woodworking. Today I'm going to work on building a Glock, or I'm tinkering with a broken clock, whatever it is. This guy who likes to tinker with stuff is now looking at 18 years in prison because Hochul and New York State want to make
An example.
make an example of him and scare all the honest people to give up their guns is really what's going on. It just drives me crazy. But in the scene, we're coming up on the chase scene, so we got to talk a little bit about this. So in between the scene and the next scene, there's a guy named Justice Tarr. Did you notice that? The guy, so he goes to a snitch, right, who tells him, yeah, this is what's going on. This is what the mob's doing. It's $2 million or whatever. And he, they always have to have somebody like this in these movies to fill in the blank. But he played in Rat Patrol.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah, and you clean him up. He played in Rat Patrol, and he was in a couple of movies with, I think, Steve McQueen. But he was the blonde guy in Rat Patrol, and that was, I guess we got to clarify. Rat Patrol was the series where they had this behind the lines unit where they had Jeeps with machine guns on the Jeeps, right? And they would disrupt the Germans.
George was the guy in charge.
They would disrupt it. They would attack the German supply lines, or maybe do some covert operations behind the lines in probably during the African campaign. When they were fighting the Germans and Italians, right? We were fighting the Germans and Italian there. So it's interesting. There's so many interesting people that are in the movie.
He was in Rat Patrol in 1966. So it was right around the same time as this movie.
Yeah, it's just a couple years before, right? And so it's the who's who at the casting call when they did this thing. But this is also where the bad guys are trying to figure out, okay, where, because Steve McQueen has hidden the body. They think he's still alive. The bad guys are now following McQueen to find out where the guy is at. And Steve McQueen recognizes him, and he sees him in the 1968 Charger, which is, to me, is a really cool car. Now, I grew up in Detroit, so we still had a lot of those cars around when I was growing up. I was born in 62, so obviously 70s into the 80s, you still had people who took care of their cars, even though we had salt that we used in Detroit. So it was hard to do, but they garaged their cars, they cleaned them off, and they still had these old classic muscle cars. And we had this main drag called Telegraph where people would kind of race their cars on just outside of the city of Detroit. But of the two cars, the Mustang, which I really liked, I thought the Charger was the in my opinion, the better.
It had better lines, my personal opinion. But
I think so too. The Mustang that was the original, the 64 was when 64 came out, right? So by the time it was 68, and this was a fastback, the Mustang, right?
Yeah.
So it was a little different lines. I like the more pony car kind of look of the Mustang. But I really liked the really elegant and sleek lines of the Charger, and of course it was
much larger vehicle, lengthwise.
Much larger.
Everything.
My aunt had that same Mustang in white.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah.
Well, when I think of the Charger, I also think of the great movie Vanishing Point. Is that it? Vanishing. Remember where they're chasing this guy and he's going across a desert, and then he ends up crashing into a couple. I think it's Vanishing Point. And he ends up crashing into two road. What are those things got the plow up front? It's but he ends up two pieces of heavy equipment, and but it was, I think he had either a Charger or a Challenger in that. But and I don't know if you guys got a chance to let's see, from Danny, the Charger had a 4-speed. All right, it's not Hurst with
Posi
traction. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, Danny, give us your thumbs up on which car you liked most, the Mustang or the Charger. A few years ago, my son says, "Hey, Dad, I got plenty of money. I want to go look at a car, right?" And I like the Challengers that we had at work. I always like those. But we go to get those Chargers at like 600 horse. And my son, he gets behind it, and the guy goes, "Okay, let's drive it." He's got us on a straightaway. Yeah, he pushed it down, and my son was shaking a little because he's never driven anything like that. And we got it up, 130 miles an hour down the straightaway on the freeway a little bit. And I told him, I go, Sean, this really isn't what you need.
Yeah,
Because he
Yeah,
was
you
still
don't
out
want that.
partying and doing all this stuff. I go, this, why
Do you have a
don't
good
keep
Honda
your-
anywhere?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Why don't you keep? I think you had
Four-door
a
Honda. That's
Corolla
what you're
or
getting.
something like that. Why don't you keep this for a while? It's paid off. Because then the note on this thing was, I forget how much it was, but then the guy says to me, "Oh, do you want to drive it?" I'll go, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a perfect car for me, but not for him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I thought about it. If my kid bought that car, there's this great racing school in Vegas. I said, I'll take him out there so he can learn. Not that I want him racing around in the damn thing, but I want him to respect what speed can do, right? It can, and but fortunately he ended up getting, a few years later, getting a Mercedes SUV, so he's doing okay. So he was just he's just appointed president of a construction company, so he's doing pretty good. So yeah, okay, Dan Regular, yep, it was Vanishing Point. Okay, I did it right. Also, Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, yes, with Peter Fonda. Yeah, that's right. I forget what year the Vanishing Point was. 70s Charger though, right? I don't think it was 68, but this is the earlier version. I liked it. Black, good, clean lines. And Steve McQueen recognizes that he's being followed, and he lets him follow him, and then he manages to get behind him, and then the chase is on, right? And so let's talk about the Mustang first. So we got the 1968 GT fastback Mustang, and I owned a 66. I bought it out here for a few years, and I just didn't have the skill set to maintain it. But I enjoyed it. It was hardtop, so it didn't have that whole fastback look. I'll be honest with you, I like the pony look. I didn't like the fastback look, but I enjoyed the car. It was just a little worn out. It had I think a 289 4-barrel. It could get up and go when you needed to, even though it was a tired car. But this is probably of all the scenes in the movie, obviously the chase scene is classic. It's iconic. It fits up there with Gene Hackman's chasing the train down in French Connection. If you've not seen the movie 7 Up, if you watch that movie, it's very much like that movie. That movie's chase scene as well. Another iconic scene from that movie. So Johnny B, what'd you think of the car first? Here's the Charger, the Mustang, and the chase scene.
Yeah, I like the Charger better. I'm not a big fan of either Dodge or Ford. I'm a Chevy guy. But who was a great, and you probably should have had him on instead of me, Rick Crago. He's had Mustang since he was a kid. And he still, last time I saw him, he had a Celine and the 500 GT in his garage with those bubble wraps that you blow up so it doesn't get any dings. I mean, he's an expert on the Mustang. I mean, he knows everything about them, where they're done, where they're made, everything. But
yeah, he's a former engineer too, so.
Yep. But I like the Charger's lines better. But what I noticed in some of the thing, they do these on certain streets, and they stop and then they redo them and do something else. There's a couple times when they're in the long straightaway where these guys, you're seeing them from the driver's side, and you see green grass, and then he's following them. There's no green grass. They didn't splice it properly in a couple areas. But hell of a chase, though. That's the big thing in this movie.
Yeah, it's the thing everybody remembers. We got a comment from, so Danny did respond, for pure power, it's the Charger. Yes. Handling, it's the Mustang.
Smaller car.
Well, I agree with that.
Smaller car.
Smaller wheelbase, easier to turn. But when they're making some of those turns, it's like, holy shit. Reminds me of that. Well, remember when we had to go to Pomona for driver training, and we'd have to do the skid pan and all that stuff. Then you have to run the course and go around the corners. Holy crap. This reminded me a lot of that. But of course, that was a lot safer than this.
Just controlled. Well, they did do this on the streets of San Francisco.
Yep.
And what you said, Scott, through the Presidio. And this isn't.
Presidio. They went. They didn't go down Lombard Street, which is the real windy one they always talk about, because you can't get any speed on that at all. But I always laughed. I told the wife last night, I said, how many times are they going to pass that green Volkswagen Bug?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you noticed that too.
Yeah, every part in the
Well, that's how
city,
they save
they're
money.
passing that green Volkswagen.
Yeah, that's how they do the money. They cut and then they replace it later and splice it together.
And then
Yeah, but it
I
was
also
good.
laughed whenever they showed the behind the bad guy driver.
Yeah.
Why was the passenger's face in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it was well done, but not like stuff that they do now with the computers and everything else
yeah.
and AI.
I mean, this was a real. I mean, for Hollywood, this was a real car chase.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Just like
It wasn't
7-Up.
CGI, and it wasn't,
Exactly.
every other car's flipping through the air and crashing into 8 other cars. And I mean, this was, to me, a more realistic car chase, and that's probably why it's really iconic. And a lot of other car chases were based on this afterwards, but now it's just kind of a joke. It's like, come on, how many have you ever seen a car chase, even in LA with all the helicopters chasing? Have you ever seen a car chase where the other car gets hit and it flips through the air and takes out 8 other parked cars? And
No, yeah, I mean what the Fast and Furious series and all that other stuff. It's goofy stuff, and you're right. I mean, as when we went through driver's training, you learn a lot of things about the shifting of the weight of the car, which causes you to lose control. You learn about stopping distance. There's a lot of, and on the skid pan, you're learning, just how quickly it is to lose control when you have snow
and which way to
water,
turn the wheel and all that
which
stuff.
way to turn the wheel. And I mean, they put you through the drills. So what was one of the drills? It was instead of braking, you shift out of the way. You remember that drill where you're coming down, you got 2 lanes, and then where the green light hits, you're supposed to shift.
Yeah. And they had
instead of braking, you got to shift to the lane that has the green light. And that's to teach you avoidance versus, because once you brake and you lock up your brakes, you lose your ability to steer, and you're going straight, right? So you learn a lot of these techniques, and they teach you the apex driving, take the apex. So obviously we're in comparison to these guys, we're relatively novice, right? But in comparison to most people with the training, because it was every 2 years we had to go to training, or every 3 years, got stretched out over time because of money.
Yeah, it turned out
George Grind was my observer when I was.
Oh, was he in your car? Yeah.
He couldn't get me to skid in the skid pan.
Oh, because you grew up in I
grew up in Washington State. I drove a pickup truck. Every corner you took was a skid. No matter how fast you were going.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with the skid pan because I grew up in Detroit, and so I had been driving for several years in ice and in the winter time. So but hey, a lot of guys in California, they never experienced it.
No. My son had to do it twice, because the first time he had it and then kind of lost control, and then they said, well, you got to do it again, and then he was fine, because he grew up in Southern California.
Yeah.
How often do you drive in the rain?
Yeah, and it's you're right. I mean, as soon as I was in LA, it's every time a big storm comes in, storm watch 2024, and they go, oh God, I got to drive with all these crazy people, not to drive in the weather. But here's a great shot. He pulls up next to him, and what I liked about this scene, because there's, as I'm watching more and more movies and I'm looking at the different context of the movies, they kind of reference back to other movies. So in this scene, or I think 7-Ups was done after this movie, but if you watch the 7-Ups, it's very similar chase scene. I think they're driving not a Nova, a Ventura. Our cop is driving a Ventura. I think our bad guys were driving a Charger in that movie as well. But the same kind of thing happened. They're chasing each other. In that scene, however, as Rod Snyder pulls up on the bad guys in this one, they try to shoot him with a shotgun, very much like this scene. And he loses control and he rams into a truck, but he ducks his head and he survives, right? In this case, they try to shoot him and they end up losing control and they crash. And it's a fiery crash in this one too. So there's a lot of similarities in this chase, and it's a long chase, and it's the iconic scene in both of these things. And that's it to me, this makes the movie on Bullitt. This whole scene, this chase scene, it actually makes a movie. Now, one of the things I noticed during the chase scene, you guys looked for the regular. I didn't see that McQueen was driving a stick. In fact, I didn't see that either one of these were driving a stick. And if you're paying attention, there's a lot of downshifting and upshifting, but these are all automatics that they're driving. That's what it looked like to me. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
So they filmed this scene. So what it said to me is they're filming the scene as they're going through whatever the Presidio and up and down and turning, as you hear the shifting, the upshifting and downshifting and all this stuff. And none of that's true. They just put that
right.
And that is also very similar to 7-Up. They did the same thing. I noticed it in that movie too. I go, oh, they're playing a game, and it's almost like you know how they use music to build up the drama in movies. Yeah. They're using these car noises, the upshifting and downshifting, very much to build the energy in the scene. Because if you're just filming two cars racing on the street, you're not getting that sound, right? So they put it. I don't know if you guys noticed that as you watched the thing.
No, I noticed that too. And then I always joke though, like these guys peel out in gravel and it makes a squealing. They put in a squealing tire sound, and it's like I've squealed. I grew up country up in Washington State. It's like I peeled out of a lot of dirt roads, and I never once heard my tires
squeal. Yeah.
No, the back end would break loose a little bit, but
the back end would slide around. And then the motorcycle, I turned to the wife and I said, "Well, there's your obligatory motorcycle guy laying the bike down."
You can see him though. You can see he's paying attention. He's getting ready. He's already a little up on his. You know what I mean? He's already up, and and he probably had like some things to stand on a little bit there, and he's already getting ready to do the turn. So I guess that they telegraphed that was what was going to happen. In the chase scene. And but hey, iconic scene, right?
Right. Yep. Great scene. And then I like the fact that he actually ends up crashed in a ditch, basically.
Yeah.
Nowadays they would have like rolled to a stop and looked at the fire and then just kind of drove away nonchalant. They actually had crash and end up in the ditch.
Yeah, exactly.
I was reading about the vehicles that were used in this. They had 2 Chargers and 2 Mustangs that they used in the movie. The 2 Chargers were so badly damaged they scrapped them. The first Mustang was scrapped. The one that he was driving right there was actually saved. It was all dented up. And it was bought by a guy right after the film, and then he sold it in 74, 76 to the Kiernan family, and they still own it to this day.
Well, the tire on the Mustang, when they show the car when he goes in the ditch, the tie rod's broken. The tires.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But I like the fact that the next scene, he's in his girlfriend's car.
He's driving. Because he goes to the motor pool to get a car, and they say, "I don't have any more car, Lieutenant." So he ended up getting in the Porsche. I think that was by design, because I think that was one of his. He was a car collector, so I think that was one of his cars.
Big car guy.
But they did I thought that Mustang had resold for like $2.3 million.
Oh yeah, really? It was bought by the Kiernan family. They've kept it, and then. It was, well, I don't know if it was sold, but it was, what I read, it was appraised. Or maybe
they appraised at that, yeah. But they did a 2020 throwback for that Mustang in the movie, and it's the Mustang GT. Yeah, actually, I got a price down here. I think it either resold or maybe they appraised it at $3.7 million.
Wow.
And I went and looked, and so they have a throwback, same color. And I wouldn't say I liked the color of the car, but it had a lot of little classic lines. Obviously, we've seen how they do the Charger we drove, but they also have the Camaro where they do that throwback where they kind of replicate the lines, although for modern stuff. And but yeah, the Mustang did do that, and it's amazing. Mustang has been continually producing some form of the Mustang since. I should get Rick on it because
I never liked the Mustangs.
You never liked the Mustangs?
No,
Rick loves them.
I bought a Dodge, worst experience ever. So I've never ever
Chevy,
bought a Dodge. So I buy all Chevy trucks. That's all I drive.
Hey, welcome, Collectible. Hail all. If you're into collecting cars, this is a great movie that we're talking about. Darn good movie. Yes, it is. So now he's in. We end up seeing another classic car in this. He goes to get a car, and And of course, they say there are none available, Lieutenant.
Yeah, and
I
Chalmers
think-
is in one driving out with Norman
With
Fell.
Norman Fell. I think
Yeah.
Norman Fell put the kibosh on him. Don't
Yeah.
give him a car.
Wouldn't give him a car, right? They're trying to slow his roll on this. But he ends up with his girlfriend, and they got a lead. You know, this is when he was with Robert Duvall. He's riding around. Who's this guy
Right.
calling Rennick? And Rennick did call his wife, and his wife was in on the plot. They had money. They'd been paid off to pretend like it was Ross, and they were going to take off. Ultimately, he's killed, but they got to shut her up too. So the real Ross ends up killing her. But they go to the scene to hopefully get information from Rennick's wife, and they're going in this 1965 Porsche. I forget I got a 356C Porsche. It's really a nice looking car, great lines. My friends would say, "Why do you buy foreign?" Because they're all from Detroit. You know, they want you to buy
Yeah.
Yeah.
American
Support-
and
support the union.
support. Well, you know, one of my friends is he's let's see, 3 are engineers, right? 3 or 4 engineers, and so, but he's big on, hey, buy U.S. and make sure you buy the right U.S. because some of them are
Wow.
owned by other people. I think Chrysler's owned by Daimler, so so he says that's, you know, the money, your money is still going over there, but GM, even though it was government motors for a while, is still here, and Ford is still primarily a U.S. manufacturer as well. So my last car, I bought a GM. I bought a Cadillac. I really like my Cadillac. It's nice and comfortable. So
I like
I'm
that.
at a point where comfort is good in my life.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I got remarried, and my wife wanted a BMW, and I like her car, but I feel like I'm in a cockpit, you know, tight, and I don't like.
That's my wife's Mercedes. It's like every time I get in it, it sits so low, I bang my head, and then I use
Yeah.
the F word about your effing car. Sits so my truck is, you know, I have the big 3500 HD, you know, complete country or high country. So you get in mine, you have to step up into it, and then the seat's like riding around in an easy chair.
Yep.
I got so much room.
I got the
But
new Chevy ZR2
Yeah,
with the 6.2 liter.
yeah,
Love it.
Yeah.
I don't like the low cars. Like we looked at a Corvette years ago when I was quite a bit heftier, and I basically had to roll out of the car. We were at El Toro Air Base or the Marine Corps base after it was shut down. They were demoing cars there, and we got invited. And I basically, honestly, I had to roll out of the car and then get up because it was too damn low.
Too damn low. Well, I got a fun car that I play with. It's a 1977 MG convertible, right? That I just bang around town, and didn't cost me very much. Guy that was working with me said, "Hey, what kind of car do you want?" I said, "Well, nothing expensive," because I got divorced, and I get just as many looks with that thing as because where I live at, well, you guys all know Mulholland Boulevard, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I live right off a thoroughfare that leads to Mulholland. And so a lot of the Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Maseratis, Porsches, Mustang, you know, all the hot, fast cars, I'll see them zipping down my street to hit Mulholland, and then they hit Mulholland, and they got all these twists and turns, and that's what they're doing on that. I didn't know that. I used to hike right past there, and I see all these cars. I go, every Sunday they're out, right? And finally I said, you know, I'm going to go see what these guys are doing. And I was in my little MG, which has no guts. It's no power whatsoever. It's 4-speed, and I'm doing all these, and I go, why the hell did I do this? Because I'm doing all these turns on this road, right? And then I see what they're doing, because you had the motorcycles, the fast motorcycles are on this road too. And I see on the top of this bluff this big banner that says photos. So what they were doing is this guy would sit on Sundays, would sit on this bluff, and he would take a picture of you as you're, you know, hitting the hairpin turns, and you're shifting back and forth in your Maserati or Ferrari or Porsche or motorcycle. And then you pull in, and he shows you the pictures he took, and you buy the pictures. That's what they're all doing. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I'm driving my little thing. I'm going slow, right? Because I don't know where I'm going, and I got a car that doesn't have any guts. And then I see all these people look over the bluff down at my car, And I'm going, oh great, I can't look up there because I don't want to go on the side either.
Yeah.
I didn't bother stopping because, but that's what was going on. That's why those guys are out there. But so in 1964, this was I thought it would have been a great car. That I do like the lines on these old Porsches. You remember Joel Brown, the detective? He had a Porsche.
yeah.
This was a little older, right? And he ended up selling to Marty Lafredo a Reserve, who then reconditioned it, and it looked great after he did it. I don't know why Joel sold it, but he was ready for a change, I guess. But I like my Cadillac SUV because it's got room, it's space. It's comfortable. I got the leather seats. It's good for traveling. Plenty of space. I just had the grandkids here. We went to Disneyland in it. It was a good car. Good car. So they go to see this gal, and this is part of the scene I didn't really. She goes in the room after the woman's been killed, and the woman's on the floor, all choked out and dead and strangled, and Jacqueline Bisset sees this, and it's right that she gets upset, but then she takes it out on Steve McQueen. And I'm like, what?
How are we going to get along?
What is this? You deal with this every day. How does this affect you? It's like, oh my God, do we have to psychoanalyze this? I mean, this is just his job, right? It doesn't,
How did she get in the room in the first place?
Yeah.
I was expecting housekeeping, coming into the room. Housekeeping, everybody in there. I mean, all the cops are just standing there, and she walks by and looks at the dead body. I'm like, "Where's your crime scene integrity?" I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just letting anybody that walks down the hallway swoop in and check out this dead body. Although I will say, I had one of my wife's cousins, her whole family, one of her family, all four out of the 5 kids were all Chicago PD at one time because their father was a retired homicide detective. So we were out driving around. I was working gangs. We got a call of 2 guys dead in the parking lot. So we get there, and the deputies did a great job. It was in Firestone's area, and they roped it all, taped it all off and wouldn't let anybody in. And this is probably 1999, because I was still at the Century at the time. And so I go into this crime scene, and I'm like, no, those are just, those aren't gang members. So we'll wait for homicide and tell them that it's not gang members, and we'll go back on our way. And he was a sergeant at the time with Chicago, and he's like, man, he goes, do you know how many people would have walked through that crime scene if it happened in Chicago? I go, what do you mean? He goes, there would have been all different cops from all over would have came to look at the body and then left. He goes, you guys, you got to sign in, you got to sign out.
Yep.
Nobody gets in there unless it's certain people. And I said, well, that's the way we've always done it as far as I know. And he goes,
we did it the right way.
Yeah.
Not Chicago. There would have been, we wouldn't even taped it off.
Yeah, different PDs, and especially back east, everything's just so different.
Yeah.
You saw that a lot when the Cops TV show came out, and they went all over the country, and you're like, what the hell are they doing? But when I was a trainee at West Hollywood, T.O. and I, we roll up on a dead body. Early Lincoln has got the handle, and he's sitting there outside waiting for homicide. And my trainee goes, here, let me show you the body. Early goes, you walk in there, you got to write a report, and everything, what you did and what you saw and what you touched. And I went, okay. And then my TO said, oh, yeah, you're right. Never mind. And we left.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Early's a big guy, too, so you're not going
to...
you ain't going to fight with Early Lincoln. And so we got some comments from Danny Regalato. Last time I saw Scotty, we were rolled into Dr. Karazi together. So I guess you guys both got surgeries from Dr. Karazi.
Yeah.
And let's see, the Jeep Wagoneer 2024, a new Hurricane engine, awesome SUV. You have to check that one out. I had Jeep Wagoneer before, and I wasn't happy with it. Always broke down. I did read The Blooding, been a few years ago, and we'll have to refresh and see if there's a movie on it. I don't know if there's a movie on it, Danny, but we'll have to look for a Wamba movie. I know that you're an aficionado of Joseph Wamba. We could do that again. And thanks for joining us again. So let's throw the scene, the real Ross. And this is the real Ross. And you finally see a glimpse of this guy when he kills the lady, right? and now he's trying to escape. He's trying to leave town, and he does have his brother. His brother is actually Vic Tayback. We see him early in the movie, and I forget what was the series he had where he was a cook. I can't remember now, but
with
was it Flo or whatever it was?
Linda Lavin. Flo.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
right,
Flo.
Yep, he was the cook.
But so here we go. He's chasing him on the airport, dodging planes is the way I see it. And there's always, like I said, there's a throwback in the movie. So do we remember a more recent movie in which a cop is chasing the bad guy on airport grounds?
Heat.
That's
Heat.
Right. Exactly the movie I was thinking of.
Pacino and the other
Great
video.
movie. Great movie.
Another
Especially
great.
when those two are sitting across from each other. Well, I'm going to arrest you, and I probably won't like it.
Yeah, and when I see a head-to-head, it's all bets are off, and that's actually based upon a true story. We did the movie Heat, and the guy who wrote the story, the scene where they're meeting in the restaurant, and it's based upon chasing a high-level crooks like you see in the movie Heat, but that actually restaurant scene did happen between the cop and the bad guy who had just been released, and so I like this where they do these throwbacks to, or actually Heat would have been looking at this movie, and I don't want to say they're copycats, but it's a way to add drama, unusual place to be chasing somebody, and in this place they're more dodging planes, and I don't know how you get away with this in shooting a scene. How do you rent multiple planes to do a scene like this? So,
they're all defunct airlines. Maybe that's what happened.
Probably. So it's kind of unrealistic because you couldn't even get on an airport these days. But I guess it could have been different in '68, right? But they're chasing the real Ross. He was on the plane. He was getting ready to take off. They ordered the plane back, which I've never done. I've never seen done. And then they're emptying the plane when Steve McQueen sees him, and the guy jumps out the back door. Again, here we go. He's jumping out the back door. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if I would survive just to jump off the plane there.
That's a broken ankle waiting to happen.
Yeah, that's the first thing I said. I'm like, when he jumped out, I'm like, there's no way. He'd break an ankle, break a leg, blow out a knee.
Yeah, so how would you have to do it? You hang, you'd get down and hang, and then drop, right? You wouldn't be jumping out like that.
No.
At least cut half the distance off, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he gets up and starts running like he just, stepped out of a doorway to a house. He's off and running.
Yeah.
And he's got a gun on him, which nowadays couldn't happen. But I was trying to remember. Okay,
back then it did.
Back then you could.
They didn't
you weren't supposed to, but you could probably get away with it because nobody was checking you at the time, right? Because I think the earliest I flew with a gun was in the '80s. I went home. I don't know why I felt I needed to take my gun. I grew out of that because
Detroit.
It was too much of a pain to take your gun back home, right? You know what? My sister was graduating from the police academy. So I took my whole uniform back, and I got a picture of my dad, Detroit Police, my sister, Detroit Police, my uncle, Wayne County Sheriff, and then me, LA County Sheriff. So that's why I took it back. But yeah, it's too much of a pain, So I just make sure. Well, I just go to places where I don't need a gun.
Yeah.
So if I fly to Detroit, I go to the suburbs, And but yeah, So a lot of things that couldn't happen today, unlikely to happen today, you see in the movie, and then he ends up in this really super crowded. Now, I've seen crowded airports, but this is really super crowded. It seems like the baggage area. I don't think I've ever seen a scene where you have half a dozen nuns in their habits, right? And but he's looking through the crowd. He's looking for this guy, and he's also, if you notice, his gun is actually it's just like a small maybe it's a Chief. I don't know if it's a Chief or not.
That's what it looks like.
But he doesn't. When he's chasing the guy through the outside, he never pulls his gun.
Right, but it's a. And I remember seeing, when you're in a gunfight, the last thing you want to get in a gunfight with is with this small chief against somebody. And this guy looks like he's got a 45 or probably a 45 at the time, the bad guy here. who's got multiple rounds, and Steve McQueen's got this little 5-shot. And well, Scott, why is this the bad gun for a shootout?
Oh, because well, people ask me, what did you carry off duty? Did you carry like a 5-shot Smith? And I was brutally honest with people. I said, I carried it as a backup in my back pocket,
right,
on patrol. I said, I never qualified in 31 years. I never qualified with it. I just carried it because my thing is it's going to be a contact shot. So that's a revolver's much better than a semi-auto. And if it was any distance, I was never going to hit anybody. I'd better just throw it at them and run. Because you can't hit shit with that unless you're standing maybe 5 feet from somebody. That little 1.5 inch with 1 3/4 inch barrel, you're not going to. Yeah. I mean, he 10 rings them twice with it. So through a glass door, I was pretty impressed with that.
Yeah, we did testing shooting through glass, and on a small caliber like that, it's unlikely it's going to go through. I actually had a Chief, but it had the shroud on it. So you remember those ones where it had the little shroud on it? So
I had a bobbed hammer.
So
it didn't get caught up on your pocket when you carried it as a backup gun. And I did actually qualify. It took not very well. You just get over the line there with that thing. But I did try to qualify with it because I was carrying it. But yeah, we all carried backup. I might have carried that if I was like going out on a date, didn't want anybody to know I had something. Because I didn't dig on the job. So, a lot of people were uncomfortable with you carrying guns. But he does end up taking this guy out and in the airport. And I think we're up on our final scene here. Let's show the final scene. But the whole thing about her getting upset by this thing, I just wanted to go back to that. I go, they kind of show a lot of that in movies, and our family is generally disconnected from the law enforcement deal with. But even then, it's like, why do you get mad at the guy because he's a cop? It's just the job he's doing, and if he doesn't bring it home, which, it's not a big deal. I mean, this is just what he does. And so here he is. He's in the final scene. He's got the bad guy is down, and I wrote a note here, but I can't remember what I wanted to say about this final thing. So anything more about the movie, John, that we didn't hit upon? That
the only thing is his partner is an actor named Don Gordon.
Yeah,
he was around for 40 years playing those type of parts and criminal parts. He was a great character actor. Just wanted to mention his name. Played in a ton of stuff.
Yeah, he's the gopher.
It was a good movie, but again, the production values compared to what even 10 years ago, you look at it and you go, man, I thought this was a great movie. Now I'm kind of like, ew,
Yeah, Danny Regalado says bobbed hammer, 5-shot, stainless Chief. Yeah,
yep.
Pretty standard. I had a pocket holster. I carried in my front pocket.
Yeah, even when in TIU, I had in my vest, I had to make a holster that velcroed inside my vest that held the 5-shot because,
yep.
Like I said, for me it was just anything over 10 feet. I'm throwing it at them and run. I'll shoot at them, but then I'm just going to throw it and run
just to scare them.
Hey, with on a note on Jacqueline Bisset being all upset, I got to tell you, good 10 or more years ago, I met a girl in San Clemente. Took her shooting. Told her how to do the safety, how to hold it, keep your finger out, blah, blah, blah. It's going to kick, don't. First time boom, she drops the gun. It goes flying everywhere. I'm like, second time I give it to her and she calms down and she shoots the
10 ring
silhouette. She hits it pretty decent and she starts crying. I'm like, what? I could just see you killing somebody. Oh my God. That was our last date.
Well, my son hit me up.
If that was the case, I would have been divorced years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
My son asked me to teach him to shoot, right? So I took him to the range. I had him go through a safety class, and then I taught him to shoot. And I was teaching him some basic combat shooting reload techniques and things like that. And there's only so much you could do at a range, right?
Right.
Because they restrict what you can do. And he says, "Hey, Dad, I have a couple girls that want to learn how to shoot. You want to come and teach us how to shoot?" And so these 20-something beautiful girls, "Oh yeah, okay, let me help you here." And they go around them, hold the gun, teach them how to hold the gun. It was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. I was
Pervert.
unattached at the time, but it was. They were actually pretty good shots. They did okay. Okay. So
For my son's 18th birthday, he wanted to go shooting at the L.A. range down there by Union Station. That gun range, I think it's gone now. And so we took my daughter and my wife and my son and his girlfriend, my daughter-in-law now. I take him down there, and so I'm showing him the same thing, how the gun operates, how to be safe with it, and all that kind of stuff. So I said, well, the object you want to shoot to the center mass in the chest. Don't try to hit the head or anywhere else. So after they each took turns shooting like 10 rounds, I said the 10 ring, not the crotch. The 10 ring. Because every one of their rounds was
shooting low. All right, Guy. Hey, thanks for coming. We got one comment from Words and Pictures about how this was a historical film. It was actually accepted by the Library of Congress and preserved there because it is such an iconic film. The best film in 1968 with Mr. Cool, Steve McQueen. And thank you, John and Scott, for coming on my show. We are at the end of the show. It's hard to believe after 2 hours. Stick around for a quick debrief. And Martine, I think we are finished. You can take it away.